The Galactic Empire's prison system was an entity of nightmares. Its facilities spread across the darkest corners of the galaxy, each designed to hold beings more dangerous than any other force in existence. Of all these prisons, the one situated on the desolate moon of Drecker stood out, encased in an energy field so strong that even light had difficulty passing through it. The prison housed the worst offenders the galaxy had ever seen, criminals of unimaginable power, some of whom had conquered entire planets, others who had desecrated galaxies with their endless war machines. But none of the prisoners inside Drecker were as feared as the creature they had recently brought in, a werewolf. The rumors of this creature's existence had long been dismissed as folklore by most of the Empire's officers, until they captured the beast on the distant, ruined planet of Nephris 7. The werewolf's arrival on Drecker was marked by a singular act of violence. It had torn through an entire squadron of the Empire's finest soldiers, ripped apart their battle armor like paper, and slaughtered them without mercy. Only a few had survived to tell the tale, though their minds would never recover from the horrors they witnessed. It was said that the werewolf had transformed under the light of Nephris 7's blood-red moons, growing to over 9 feet tall with fur thick as iron and claws that could cut through steel like butter. The captain in charge of Drecker 4's operations, Dalrick, had ordered the creature contained at any cost. He was not a man who dealt with failure well. His reputation among the Empire's elite was built on his efficiency and ruthlessness, and he had no tolerance for anything that threatened that. But as he watched the werewolf being transported into the deepest, most secure cell, even his stone-hard resolve faltered for a brief moment. Dalrick stood at the observation window, looking down at the creature in its cage. The werewolf had been chained, its hands shackled by energy cuffs that nullified its supernatural strength. The cell itself was made of a material so dense that even the mightiest of beings would have a difficult time breaking through. And yet, even under these conditions, the werewolf's eyes burned with a hatred so pure it could almost be felt through the thick glass. "Is it secure?" Dalrick asked the lead technician, a man named Drac, who stood beside him. "We've analyzed every inch of its physiology, Captain," Drac replied, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "We've nullified its ability to change forms, suppressed its regenerative capabilities. If it tries anything, the suppression field will activate." Dalrick's gaze lingered on the creature. "Are you certain it won't break free?" Drac swallowed nervously. "The creature is unlike anything we've encountered. Its regenerative abilities are almost limitless. But yes, Captain, I'm confident. We've taken every precaution." The werewolf's ears twitched, its eyes narrowing as it sensed their presence. It growled low, a rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate the very walls of the prison. Dalrick turned away, his mind already moving to the next task. The Empire had an interest in the werewolf's abilities, more than just curiosity. They wanted to study it, to understand how such a creature could survive the harshest environments and heal from nearly any injury. They believed the werewolf could be an asset, a weapon in the ongoing conflict against their enemies. As Dalrick left the observation room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The werewolf had been captured, yes, but he sensed that it was only a matter of time before it found a way to escape. It wasn't arrogance that troubled him. It was the unshakable conviction that a creature like the werewolf could never be fully contained. In the deepest recesses of Drecker 4's prison, far from the observation window, the werewolf lay in its cell, staring at the cold metal walls. The chains that bound it were uncomfortable, but they weren't the true source of its pain. It could feel the suppression field buzzing in the air around it, suppressing its transformation, holding it in a fragile human form that was only a shadow of what it truly was. The beast inside clawed at its mind, demanding to be freed, to be allowed to rip apart everything in sight. But the werewolf resisted, knowing that there was a plan. There always was. It remembered the destruction it had caused on Nephris 7. The soldiers, the civilians, none of them had stood a chance. The werewolf had grown tired of being a mere legend. It wanted to show the universe what true power looked like. It wanted to remind them that no cage, no chains, no walls, no No field could hold it forever. For now it waited. Across the prison, Dalrick moved through the corridors, his mind racing. The werewolf's capture had been a significant victory for the Empire, but Dalrick knew that it would also bring more challenges. What if this creature, this beast, was just the beginning? What if there were others like it, out there in the far reaches of the galaxy, waiting for their turn to be captured or destroyed? His thoughts were interrupted as his communication device buzzed. He glanced at the screen. The message was from one of the prison guards, an urgent report about the werewolf. He read it quickly, his expression hardening as he did. "There's been a malfunction," Dalrick muttered under his breath. "The suppression field, it's flickering." He stormed down the hallway, his boots echoing in the silent prison. His mind raced as he imagined what could be happening. A malfunction could mean that the werewolf was in the process of escaping. A containment breach could be catastrophic, not just for Drekker 4, but for the Empire itself. By the time Dalrick reached the werewolf cell, the atmosphere had shifted. Something was different. The guard posted outside the cell was on the ground, his helmet cracked, unconscious, or worse. Dalrick pushed through the heavy door, rushing inside to find the werewolf standing in the center of the room, its chains shattered. Dalrick's heart skipped a beat. The creature was already changing. The moonlight through the prison's small viewport, casting long shadows over its monstrous form. The werewolf's fur rippled as its muscles swelled, its claws elongating to their full, deadly length. It was free. "Sound the alarms!" Dalrick shouted to the few remaining guards who had rushed to the scene, but his voice was drowned out by the growl that reverberated through the prison, the sound of the beast finally unleashed. Dalrick's pulse raced. This was no longer about simply containing the creature. It was a race against time, one that he was losing. The shrill alarms tore through the prison, a sound designed to instill fear, but to Dalrick quell. It was nothing more than the background to his thoughts as he raced through the hallways of Drekker 4. The werewolf had escaped, and nothing could prepare him for what that meant. His mind was already running through all the worst-case scenarios. The Empire's finest were in danger, and the galaxy's most dangerous prisoner was now free, running amok in the most secure facility the Empire had ever constructed. It was the nightmare scenario he had always feared. His boots pounded against the metal floors, every step a reminder that time was running out. The werewolf had already begun its rampage. Through the walls of the prison, Dalrick could hear the deafening sounds of clawing, snarling, and the frantic shouts of guards as they were torn apart. There was no hope of containing it through standard methods now. No energy field, no suppression system. None of it could stop the beast. The door to the central control room hissed open as Dalrick stormed in, his sharp eyes scanning the monitors. On every screen, there was chaos. Guards scattered in all directions. Hallways filled with smoke and the blood of the fallen. And in the center of it all, the werewolf moved through the prison like a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. "Activate the lockdown," Dalrick barked, his voice cold and commanding. "Seal off every section of the prison. No one gets in or out." Drac, the lead technician, was already scrambling over the control panels. His hands trembled, but he didn't hesitate. He pressed the necessary buttons, and the massive gates that divided the prison's sections slammed shut with a resounding thud, sealing the werewolf in one half of the facility. For a moment, Dalrick allowed himself a fleeting sense of relief. The beast was confined for now, but then he saw it. The werewolf had reached the central power grid. "It's going after the power," Dalrick muttered, the realization dawning on him like a heavy weight. "It's trying to disable the entire prison. Captain, if it succeeds, we'll lose control of the entire facility," Drac said, his voice high with panic. "We'll have no way to track it, no way to stop it." Dalrick clenched his fists, his mind calculating. He knew the werewolf wasn't just fighting to escape. It was fighting to dismantle the very system that could hold it back. It wasn't just power it sought, it was freedom. The werewolf had no intention of being captured again. Dalrick's only hope was to reach it before that power grid was destroyed. "Prepare the extraction teams," Dalrick ordered. And get me a line to Commander Vex. We need reinforcements. Now. The technician scrambled to relay the message, but Dalrick wasn't waiting. He turned on his heel and sprinted out of the room, his mind set on the task ahead. His soldiers would be the first to die. They would sacrifice everything to slow the beast down long enough for Dalrick to reach it. That was their duty, just as it was his to ensure the survival of the Empire. He reached the outer hallways and felt the full force of the chaos bearing down on him. His mind, cold as ice, focused on the immediate. The werewolf had already torn through 4 of his teams. The body parts strewn across the floors were a grim testament to the creature's speed and ferocity. There was no sign of the werewolf itself, but the sound of its growls echoed through the hollow walls, closer with every passing second. Dalrick knew it wouldn't be long before it found its way to the main power core, and once that happened, there would be no stopping it. His heart pounded in his chest, not out of fear, but out of the cold realization that if he didn't act now, everything he had worked for would be destroyed. The Empire had placed its trust in him to handle this operation, and now it would fall to him to ensure it didn't implode under his watch. He moved with purpose, each step faster than the last, his eyes darting back and forth as he passed security monitors. The creature was close. Too close. The power core room was just ahead, and Dalrick knew that once he entered, he would be walking straight into the heart of the beast territory. It would have fortified its position by now. The werewolf had always been more than just an animal. It was a strategist, an apex predator that learned from every encounter. Dalrick had underestimated it, and now the consequences of that mistake were coming to bear. Dalrick reached the entrance to the core room, his hand hovering over the door control. He stopped for just a moment, his mind focusing. He needed a plan, a way to deal with the werewolf without turning the entire prison into a bloodbath. His soldiers were already dead, and the reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. But Dalrick had always relied on one thing above all else: his ability to think quickly and decisively. With a quick motion, Dalrick activated the door, stepping into the vast chamber. The room was bathed in a red glow from the power grid, its hum resonating through the walls. At the far end of the room, Dalrick saw it, the werewolf, its monstrous form silhouetted against the flickering lights of the power core. It had paused, sensing the approach of its captor. The werewolf's eyes locked onto Dalrick's. The air between them crackled with tension. The room fell silent, save for the growls emanating from the creature's throat. Dalrick took a slow, deliberate step forward, his hand reaching for the weapon at his side. "Do you think you can stop me?" the werewolf growled, its voice deep and guttural, as if it were speaking from the very bowels of hell. Dalrick didn't flinch. "I don't need to stop you. I just need to contain you." With a roar, the werewolf lunged forward, its massive claws swiping through the air. Dalrick barely dodged, feeling the rush of wind as the claws grazed his shoulder. He staggered back, but he was already moving, drawing his plasma rifle with one fluid motion. He aimed it at the beast, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, the room trembled violently. The power grid was failing. The werewolf's claws had struck the core's containment system, and Dalrick could hear the hiss of escaping energy. He didn't have time to think. The situation was no longer just about the werewolf. It was about stopping the chain reaction that would destroy the entire prison and unleash this creature upon the galaxy. Dalrick's eyes narrowed. This was the endgame. Dalrick's grip tightened on his rifle as the werewolf tore into the last remnants of the power core, its massive claws shearing through reinforced steel like paper. The room shuddered again, and the lights flickered, casting erratic shadows across the trembling walls. The beast was only moments away from causing a catastrophic failure, one that would ignite the entire facility. Dalrick's pulse quickened, but he kept his composure. There was no time for hesitation now. The werewolf turned its gaze back on him, the air between them charged with a primal intensity. It was more than just an animal now. It had become something far more dangerous, a creature of rage and purpose, locked in a deadly dance with Dalrick for control of the situation. "You're a fool if you think you can stop me," the werewolf growled, its voice laced with venom, deep and guttural. Dalrick's jaw tightened. "This ends now." He stepped forward, his rifle raised, but the werewolf had already lunged, its claws swiping through the air with a terrifying swiftness. The shot rang out just as Dalrick twisted to the side, narrowly avoiding the strike. The blast from his rifle lit up the room, but the werewolf's speed was unmatched. The beast barely flinched as the bolt of energy grazed its side. It snarled, the wound healing almost immediately, as if it had never been there in the first place. The creature's resilience was staggering, and Dalrick's heart sank. This was not just any escape. This was a deliberate act, a carefully orchestrated rebellion. He had underestimated its intelligence. Dalrick backpedaled, his mind racing. The werewolf wasn't just trying to escape. It was trying to destroy everything, to burn this place to the ground and leave nothing but ashes in its wake. The prison's defenses, the Empire's technology, all of it was meaningless to the beast now. It had become a force of nature, unstoppable, untouchable, and capable of inflicting devastation on an unimaginable scale. Dalrick's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the power core's containment breach, the deafening crack of metal and the hiss of escaping energy. The room was now plunged into total darkness, save for the flickering emergency lights that bathed the room in a blood-red hue. He couldn't let the werewolf destroy this place. He couldn't let it escape. His only option was to fight fire with fire. Dalrick had known this day would come, and he had prepared for it. His fingers brushed over the edge of his belt, feeling the cold metal of the emergency explosives. He had only a few charges left, enough to cause a localized detonation strong enough to disable the werewolf without risking the entire prison. But he had to be quick. He had to act before the beast turned this room into a graveyard. With a swift motion, Dalrick pulled one of the charges free and slapped it onto the wall just below the power core. He didn't waste time to watch it adhere. Instead, he spun to face the werewolf, his rifle raised. It was circling him, its glowing eyes never leaving him for a second. The creature was anticipating his every move, studying him with a predator's patience. Dalrick's grip tightened around the rifle, and he could feel the sweat on his palms. But there was no time to hesitate. The werewolf charged again, moving with terrifying speed. Dalrick fired as it closed the distance, his shot hitting the creature in the chest. The impact was enough to stagger it, but once again, the beast's healing abilities kicked in, and the wound vanished as though it had never existed. Dalrick didn't let up. He kept firing, his rifle's muzzle flashing with every shot, but the werewolf was too fast, too resilient. Then Dalrick saw something, a flash of recognition in the beast's eyes, a moment of clarity that betrayed its true intentions. The werewolf wasn't just fighting him. It was trying to lead him somewhere. It was drawing him into a trap. Dalrick's heart raced as the realization hit him like a freight train. The werewolf wasn't here by accident. It had a plan. It had always had a plan, and he had been playing right into its hands. In that instant, Dalrick understood. The werewolf wasn't just a prisoner. It had been released on purpose. The Empire's security was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion that masked the true nature of this mission. And Dalrick, the one tasked with capturing and containing this beast, had been nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game. The werewolf halted, its eyes narrowing as it watched Dalrick, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Dalrick's pulse thundered in his ears, but he forced himself to remain calm. He knew what he had to do, but it meant facing the truth about everything he had believed. "You're not just an animal," Dalrick said, his voice low, as if he were speaking to himself more than the beast. "You've been set loose. All of this, the prison, the Empire, the mission, it was never about containment. It was about making sure you were free." The werewolf's grin was slow, deliberate. "Finally, someone understands." The words were a revelation, but they brought no comfort. Dalrick's mind churned as the implications of the werewolf's words sunk in. The creature was a tool, a weapon. The Empire had underestimated it. thinking it was nothing more than a monster to be locked away. But the truth was far darker. The werewolf had been part of something much larger, something far more dangerous than Dalrick had ever known. Dalrick took a step back, his hand still clutching the rifle, but now his thoughts were elsewhere. The werewolf had been unleashed not just to break free, but to create chaos, to shatter everything the Empire had built. And now, it was up to Dalrick to stop it. He was the last line of defense. But as the creature lunged toward him again, Dalrick knew the odds were stacked against him. The werewolf's claws slashed through the air, faster than Dalrick could react. He barely managed to dodge, feeling the heat of the strike as the beast's claws grazed his shoulder. His heart pounded in his chest, but there was no time to think of pain. Dalrick rolled to the side, reaching for the last of his charges. The werewolf circled back, its eyes gleaming with victory. Dalrick's body screamed in protest, but he ignored it. He had one chance left, and this time he wouldn't miss. The explosive charge in his hand was his only hope. With every ounce of strength left in his body, Dalrick hurled it at the power core. The explosion rocked the room, and for a moment, everything was drowned in a blinding light. When the smoke cleared, Dalrick staggered to his feet, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. The werewolf lay motionless on the ground, but Dalrick knew better than to believe it was over. It was never over with this creature, but for now, it was contained. Dalrick turned away, his mind filled with a new understanding of the true nature of the enemy he faced. The war was just beginning,